Hey guys! As you can see by the title and the thumbnail, I am going to be doing a March reading wrap up. I am excited to talk about the books that I read this month. I read some ones that I didn't so much love, but I also read some ones that I literally loved. So what do you say we just get straight into it? Before we do get into the books, I do want to start doing some reading stats, so let's just get into that. So this month I read 6,258 pages. I read 15 books. I read 10 romances, 3 fantasies, 2 thrillers, and I also read 7 books out of the 8 books I picked for my March TBR, which I think is pretty good. So yeah, let's just get straight into it, shall we? Okay, so the first book that I did pick up in March was Funny Feelings by Tara Dewitt. So this book actually follows a comedian main character, which I've never read a book that has to do with a comedian or anything. I didn't really like this book. I I didn't really like this book. I gave it a 2.5 stars, which is a pretty low rating for me. I really felt like the plot was all over the place in this book. Like, I really didn't understand what plot we were trying to follow. It follows a comedian. Her name is Farley. She basically needs to fake date in order to like move up in her job or something like that. And I feel like the whole comedy and comedian plot in this book was kind of weird in my opinion. Like in some of the parts where she would be like doing her stand up, I would find it a little cringy, but that might just be me because it takes a lot for me to laugh at any stand up comedian, to be honest. Like I really am picky with that kind of stuff, and she just like icked me out a lot in this book. I feel like I was just inwardly cringing a lot reading this one. And the one weird thing about this book was I felt like there was barely any groveling within these two characters. Like there wasn't any push or pull or tension or anything. It just felt a little off. Other than that, like it was 320 pages. It was a short read, but it just wasn't my favorite. Like, do I recommend it? Honestly, don't know. Like if maybe you're a comedian and you want to read a book where there's like a main character who is a comedian, I would say pick it up. But me personally, I didn't super enjoy it, so take with that what you will. Alright, so the next book that I did pick up was These Infinite Threads by Tara Mafi, and this is the second book following This Woven Kingdom. I feel the same way about this one than I did the first one, which is weird because I thought I was really gonna enjoy this one because of the way This Woven Kingdom ended. I was like, okay, this one has the potential to be like maybe a 4 or 4.5, depending on like where the story took us. The thing is I gave it a 3.75 stars, which is a good rating, but I gave the first one a 3.75 as well. What's weird is I liked what happened more in this one, but it still like fell off. It wasn't as good as I thought it was gonna be. Also, it's kind of weird because all of the events in this book happened in the span of like one day, which like this book is like 400 pages, which for fantasy is actually not that long, but it kind of felt a little weird. Like the timing felt a little off. Like I feel like in the middle of a trilogy, the second book always falls off the hardest. Like it needs to end off in like the craziest way ever, or else it's just not going to be as good. And I feel like the ending was just a little underwhelming in my opinion. Also, another thing is the POV we get in this book. Basically, it's a love triangle. And the other chapter POV we get is from the guy that we don't really like. Like, we don't like this guy in the love triangle, but yet we get his chapter every other point of view. And it was just so difficult to go through his chapters, to be honest. I just skimmed through them, like, because I really don't like his character at all. Like, he's just such a pick me. Like if a guy can be a pick me, then this guy was a pick me. Like I'm still gonna continue. Like it's a trilogy, I have one left, and I am curious to see where it goes. Do I recommend it? Yeah, sure. Like I recommend it, but it's not like one of my top recommendations, if that makes sense. Oh my gosh, the next book I read, I do not have it with me physically. I read Betting on You by Lynn Painter. This book was everything. I knew Lynn Painter was good because I literally love everything she writes, but she literally ate with this one. This one was so good. I gave it a 4.5 stars, which is such a great rating for a YA romance. Like, I feel like with YA. Like, I love adult romances, but with YA, I feel like they really prioritize emotional relationships over physical stuff, which I much more prefer, like emotional over physical. But then I feel like if there is going to be physical, there needs to be an emotional. I just love the way that she puts her stories together. I'm always like, every YA is going to be the same by her, but no, like for some reason this one has a little bit of different themes. It has different character personalities. Like, it was so good. The dynamic between these two characters was so good. I read this book in a reading vlog, and I was literally like giggling, kicking, screaming my feet reading this book. Like, it was so stinking good. If you have not picked this one up yet, I highly, highly, highly recommend you do so. The next book I read, Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I gave this book a 3.5 stars, which is not a bad rating. I will preface it by that. Here's the thing is, I like her writing. I like her stories, but with this one, I just think this book weirded me out a little bit. Like, I honestly did not know what I was going into with this book, and I unfortunately looked up what the Omegaverse was in the middle of reading it, and I was like, that doesn't really align with my book taste, so I was really nervous starting it. Then some things happened in this book, and I was like, okay, don't know how I feel about that. I don't know how I feel about that. There's just one thing that happened in this book where I was like, yeah, I just feel like it's not redeemable. If you've read this book, then you obviously know. But here's the thing is, you could say it's my fault because I didn't know before reading it that this type of book can have those type of things. I just didn't really like it. Basically, we're following Misery, who is a vampire, and then Lo, who is a werewolf, and it's a marriage of convenience. And in between this marriage of convenience, Misery also loses her sisters, like someone kidnaps her, so we're following kind of a mystery involved in that. And I did like the mystery element of this book, but I also felt like the plot was a little bit like all over the place. Like, it didn't feel like a definitive plot in my opinion. It just felt a little rocky. Didn't feel like a smooth up and down. I'm not like sitting here saying I'm never picking up another Ali Hazelwood book again. That's not true. I will honestly pick up anything she writes, but this one just was not my cup of tea. And if it was your cup of tea, all the power to you. Literally. Okay, so the next book that I picked up was The Teacher by Frida McFadden. I gave this book a 3 stars. I love Frida McFadden with all of my heart, but for some reason this one was a little off to me. But again, I think this is my fault. I did not read the synopsis before getting into this book, and I did not know that that type of content was going to be in it, so I literally almost DNF'd this book because I was so surprised of the things that happened, but it was talked about in the synopsis, so like, it's kind of my fault for not reading it. You're basically following these two teachers, and you're also following a student POV, which I think that's all I gotta tell you. And things go down, dynamics start to happen, and I will say, Frida McFadden always gets me right here. The last 2 pages in this book, I got the chills. Like, that bumped it up 2 or 3 stars for me. I was like, okay, she did it again. I just think the type of content weirded me out a little bit, but she still got me with that twist. Like, it was so good. It just felt like every single character in this book was unredeemable. Like, I understand you're reading a thriller, which thrillers for the most part holds unredeemable characters all the way around, but there's always like 1 or 2 redeemable things that happen. Everything that happened in this book was just terrible. Like, it was just a dumpster fire of terrible things, all of these people and all of their faults, and it just was all around wrong. It's on Kindle Unlimited though, so I'll pick it up if you have a Kindle. Okay, so the next book that I picked up was Do Your Worst by Rosie Danan. I gave this book a 3.5 stars. This book was so stinking cute. It's a very short read. I think it's maybe just over 300 pages. This book follows our MFC named Riley, and she is actually a curse breaker. And she hears about this castle in Scotland, and she decides to try and break the curse. Meanwhile, she meets this guy at a bar, and they hit it off, and then the next day she overhears him talking crap about this curse breaker who is coming to like break the curse in the castle. So basically they like end off on the wrong foot, and then they kind of become a little bit of enemies, if you will. I gave this book a 3.5 stars. Like, it was cute, but I feel like I much preferred the history aspect of this book because it constantly is talking about like the history of the castle, the history of the curses, like all of this stuff. And I'm such a history buff that I feel like I much preferred the history aspect versus the romance. Like, the romance just kind of like fell off for me, and I was like more interested in like the lore of the castle and all of this stuff. I also felt like there was something weird that happened. I won't say, but something weird happened in this book, and I was like, I didn't like that. I didn't like that. If you read this book, then you might know what I'm talking about. It was just a little off to me. It was just a little off. 3.5 stars. Cute, short, good. So the next book that I picked up on my Kindle was Redeemed by Lauren Asher, and this is actually the last book in the Dirty Air series that I've been reading for like the past 3 months now. And this one was super cute. I gave this book a 3.75 stars though. I feel like as a whole, this series was not my favorite. Like, no books surfaced 4 stars for me. I felt like the last one was a little too long. The ending was very dragged out. Like, I don't know what it is about these authors who like feel the need to drag out the last 100 pages of a book. I do not think a contemporary romance should ever surpass 400 pages in my opinion. It was still cute. Like, a 3.75 stars is a really good rating, but I felt like I couldn't really reach it to a 4 because of the ending, and it just dragged on, and it just wasn't my favorite. I just didn't really love any of the books in this series. I feel like if I maybe read them earlier on in my whole reading journey, I maybe would have enjoyed it more, but I feel like I've just read so many romance books now that like it takes a lot for any contemporary romance to like wow me at this point, which I don't know if that sounds like entitled. I don't mean that to sound entitled, but I still love her writing. I still love everything she writes, and I will still read everything that Lauren Asher puts out because obviously like she's just like such a great writer, and I feel like her recent books that she's been putting out have definitely improved in terms of like the writing and pacing. So yeah. Okay, so the next book that I actually picked up was These Twisted Bonds by Lizzy I. This is actually the last book in the duology. The first one is These Hollow Vows, and then we have These Twisted Bonds. I really, really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 4 stars, and I just feel like everything that happened in this book was like a really great conclusion to the story. I really liked the way this plot went. I just really love a good YA fantasy. I feel like they always just hit the spot for some reason. Like, but do I remember the plot? Like, I low-key forgot everything that happened in this book. Like, I don't know what it is, but like I'm like coming up with a blank. I know that I really liked the romance in this book. I really don't like Sebastian, but I don't really think anyone does. It's just a duology, so it's like very short-lived. It's not like a super huge commitment, which that's why I love fantasy duologies and trilogies, because I feel like they're so easy to go through because you're not really prioritizing a huge series. So yeah, really enjoyed this one. It was cute. I recommend picking up this duology because it's just a really easy read. The next book I read this month was The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. This is such an anticipated read for me because I've heard such great things about this book. This book was literally so magical. It fully encompassed that feeling of like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or I don't know if this is niche, but the book Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. If you guys have read that book, this feels so similar to it in a way that it's so magical, but it's real. It was so good. I gave this book a 4.25 stars. Like, it's such a short read. Like, it took me maybe like a day and a half to read it. It was truly such a wonderful piece of literature. I truly enjoyed my time reading it. You're basically following like this teacher, and she wants to adopt this little boy who goes to the school, and there's this famous writer who writes children's books, and he actually was on a hiatus for a long time, and he then created a game to these people that he is like mingled with, which she's actually met him in the past, and she is a part of this little game that he is hosting who basically, whoever wins this game gets the last book that he writes. And it's such a big deal because this writer is like such a huge deal. Like, he is a big children's writer in this world. I think he was based on like a little island, and it was so magical, and there was like little trinkets and little, it was just so cute. Like, the ending definitely made me tear up a little bit. It was super sweet and super sincere. Okay, so the next book that I picked up was First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. This book is supposed to be like a thriller, but to me it felt like literary fiction type with a slight, and I'm talking like slight, mystery element. It was so boring to me. I literally gave it a 2 stars, which is crazy because I thought I was gonna love this book so much. Giving it 2 stars is literally crazy. Guys, like, I was so bored reading this book. Nothing happens in it. It was not thrilling in the least. It was barely even a mystery. But the thing is, I was seeing people really liking it, which I like. Books are very subjective, so you might enjoy this book, but I certainly didn't. In fact, I forget everything about it, didn't like it, was bored, literally fell asleep. The most mundane thriller storyline I've ever read. Dare I even call it a thriller? Just was not good. Then we move on to much brighter, happier days because I finally read Happy Place by Emily Henry. Oh my gosh, guys. I gave this book a 4.75 stars. I knew I liked Emily Henry's writing. I knew I did. But this book really just brought it to the next level. Her writing is so beautiful. The way that she explains things in such a literal sense, in like the most beautiful way. Like, I don't really know if that makes sense, but like, her writing is just so stinking stunning. I fully enjoyed my time reading this book. The themes of friendship and family in this book were so well done. As someone who has trouble making friends, staying in friend groups, I just really felt like this book spoke to me in the way that like you really mourn your friends that you have grown up with and then like grown apart. Like, it really encompassed that kind of mourning feeling. I like literally cried so hard reading this book because the way that she talked about friends and growing apart were so beautiful and was so sad. It made me literally sob crying this book. Also, the romance on top of that was so good. This is a second chance for anyone wondering. I just really, really, really enjoyed my time reading this. At first, I rated it 5 stars, and then I brought it down to a 4.75 just because I don't know that I like was a 5-star read for me. I'm so excited for a funny story. Okay, so the next book that I picked up was One Day by David Nichols. I have been hearing about the show for literally a month at this point. My sisters have been begging me to watch the show, but I was like, nope, I'm holding out. I'm reading the book first. Okay, so here's the thing. I gave this book a 3 stars. So, here's the thing. I don't know that I really enjoyed his format of writing. You're basically following these 2 characters within a span of 20 years, and they meet each other on one day of the year. And I really felt like a lot of mundane things were stated in this book that really did not need to be said. Like, I got bored a lot in the beginning of this book. Like, it was really hard to get through that I could not even read it physically. I had to listen to the audiobook for it because I was having such a hard time reading it physically because, one, the pages are super thin, the words are pretty small, so it just like, it was hard to get into this book. And then you kind of get in like the 75% page mark where like the characters like clearly like each other and they're clearly building this relationship and all this stuff, and then something happens at the end. So yeah, this book I give 3 stars. Not a bad rating, but I just don't think his writing format is for me. The show, on the other hand, could send me into a spiral of how good it was. Totally discarding the book. Don't even read the book. don't read the book, watch the show. That is like the first time I will ever recommend a show over the book. The book was just not as good as the show. The show, the actors, the ending. Then I finally read A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. I have been putting this book off for months. I just knew that I wouldn't like this book, and I was right. I should trust my intuition more. I gave this book a 3 stars. I feel like this type of fantasy, which was definitely a cozy fantasy, it was just a little bit weird. This fantasy is definitely more of like a folk, spirit, elemental type of fantasy, rather like a high fantasy, dragons, princesses, princes, all of this stuff. I still really enjoy her writing. Like, there was definitely some beautiful quotes in this book, but I just felt like this book bored me too much. The pacing of this book was really weird because you're not really getting any action, barely any dialogue. Like, there's not a ton of dialogue in this book. It's basically just atmosphere, the vibes, all this stuff. You're following this guy named Jack, and Jack is a bard, and he was commissioned to go to this one island to be a bard on that island, and then he was actually told to go back to his homeland because there has been word that girls have gone missing, and apparently his singing can help bring them back, which is kind of like a weird plot. Obviously, there is like a slight subplot of romance in this book, and there actually ends up being like a weird marriage of convenience. Like, it was cute, but I feel like in this type of book where vibes and atmosphere of this book are definitely like prioritized more than like the romance, tension, groveling aspect, like it was shown, like I really didn't root for them. I wasn't like in love with the romance at all. I don't know that I'll be picking up the second one, and if I do, I'm not like at a race to finish it. It'll probably just be something more casual that I'm not gonna like pick up and read in one sitting. This wasn't my type of book, but some people love this kind of fantasy, and if you do like something a little more elemental, I recommend this. Okay, and now the last book that I picked up in March, Life's Too Short by Abby Jimenez. I literally love Abby Jimenez with my whole entire heart. I gave this book a 4 stars. It was so cute. It was unlike any plot I've ever read in a book. You're following this girl who is basically a travel vlogger. Her name is Vanessa, and she lives in an apartment complex. She is basically taking care of her sister's baby, but the baby was dropped off of her apartment and her sister long gone. So she basically has this newborn baby. You're following this other guy named Adrian, and he's also in the apartment complex, and they basically just meet up and like instantly become really, really great friends. Like, the foundation in their relationship was so top tier. It was so good. I loved everything about it. It was just so cute and so sweet. And the way that everything came together was just so well done. Like, I really, really enjoyed this one. I highly, highly recommend anything Abby Jimenez writes. Is just chef's kiss. So good, so easy to read, so digestible, so good. So that was all of the books that I read in March. I really hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Please leave a like, please subscribe, do all those things that you guys know how to do, and I will hopefully see you in my next YouTube video. Bye.